So if you didn't catch our first video in this series, it was on casing selection, and I had a lot of fun anyways, bashing some tires into rims and curbs outside, but we'll link that video if you didn't check it. Today we're gonna be moving into tread patterns, and Sean, we've got 5 tires here, but really we're gonna kind of focus on 4. What kind of are your design aspects and elements that you take into account for racers and therefore consumers when you're making tires?
So as we design tires, we essentially look at what user group we're trying to design a tire for. Is that your trail rider, XC racer, downhill racer, etc. Once we kind of define that user group, we can then dive into tread pattern design, and we'll look if it needs to be fast rolling. We'll look at low knob height, using correct compounds, things like that. For downhill racers, it's what's the conditions? Is it going to be for rocky, hard pack, or loose over hard? Is it for mud? And so we take terrain into consideration as well.
Okay. All right. And so obviously I think everyone has probably seen, right? You've got everything from very tightly packed, low profile knobs to more spaced out, spiky knobs. Okay. What, from like a real high level, if you were going to talk to a person who isn't familiar with bike tires, would you say is the difference from, say, like something like this here, which is your Thunderbird and not a tire that we run, versus something like a Tacky Chan or a Magic Mary?
Exactly. So the Thunderbird is designed specifically to be a cross-country race tire, or it's very popular in the gravel world as well. It has low tread height in the center, a little bit larger shoulder knobs, but it's all about rolling speed. Okay. And so this is going to be our fastest rolling mountain bike tire that we make, and so it's all about speed. When we go to something like the Tacky Chan, we will then talk about going to higher knob profiles, more open spacing, so that way it penetrates the ground and dirt a little bit more. Then we'll start looking to it, ramping knobs, things like that, to still have lower rolling resistance, but again, penetrate the ground so you have better cornering. Okay.
So why would someone not want to run this on an XC bike if you've got better traction?
So with better traction, yes, it will brake and corner better, but it's going to roll considerably slower than the lower profile knobs that we have there.
Okay, and that's because of how far spaced they are and the height of the knobs?
Not necessarily the spacing, but it's the knob height itself that would lead to that. And the compound choice, obviously, too.
Okay, because essentially you're floating on top of the knobs. Exactly. I guess it's like hearing a passenger car tire versus a mud tire driving down the highway.
Exactly, or like a road bike tire with no knobs versus the taller knobs get. Typically, the higher the rolling resistance is going to be.
Okay, so now we have 2 tires that I would say to the untrained eye look pretty similar, and that is the Wicked Will and the Knobby Nick. Both have relatively lower profile lugs and a little bit tighter spaced lugs as well, but kind of talk to us about soil and rolling resistance.
So these 2 tires are designed for those 120 to 140 mil travel trail bikes. Okay. And the Wicked Will specifically on the lower end of that, and the more marathon, just longer trail ride type bikes, with its tighter lug spacing, it's going to have lower rolling resistance. It's also meant for more hard pack type terrain, versus say the Knobby Nick here, where that has a little more open profile between the center and the shoulder lug. And so the Knobby Nick will work better in softer terrain versus the Will on more hard pack terrain.
Okay, and you know, again, I know we're talking Wicked Will and Knobby Nick, and I know, you know, you don't want to talk about every tire brand out there, but like, you know, all other tire brands are manufacturing different steps of tires with a similar profile, right? From super fast to super gnarly.
Absolutely. The same kind of philosophies go across brands. So the more open spacing you see, the rolling resistance will typically be a little bit higher. They'll also shed. The shedding of mud properties is going to increase, and it also allows for additional penetration into like loamy soils and things like that. Okay. The smaller knobs will offer you more efficient rolling properties, but also work better on hard pack because you have more lugs in contact with the ground at all times.
Okay. Yeah, so the closer the knobs are, the better it'll be on hard pack, but the less penetration you'll get when things get softer.
Exactly.
And how about for loose over hard conditions?
Loose over hard, we found that you actually want to have a little bit more of a gap, so that way it can penetrate and it gives the loose material a place to go.
Okay.
So that's what you'll notice with the tacky chan that we talk about in a little bit. It has a nice large open shoulder area to really allow that material a place to go.
And for, I guess, those who, you know, maybe are new to riding or are lucky enough, I don't know if I want to say lucky enough even, because I love loose over hard conditions, but for those who are unaware, if you could imagine like hard pack, I'm thinking this a lot about like the Southwest, right? If you've got a hard pack base layer and then loose marbly stones on top, it's a hard compact base layer with loose on top, and I think that's why, like, if we pull back that knobby nick and say your Magic Mary, which you have, you can see if there's a lot of loose, small little rocks on the ground, they're gonna fit in these spaces, and these taller knobs are gonna penetrate beyond the little marbles on top and hit that compacted, you know, hard bottom, right?
Correct.
Slower rolling again.
Yeah, slower rolling, a little bit taller lug height, more aggressive. So this is going to the Magic Mary will tend to be your 150 mil travel and above bike. It still makes for a great tire on if you want to get super rowdy on the shorter travel stuff, but typically 150 and above is where the Mary starts to really come into its own.
Okay, and lots of people seem to have a tighter spaced tire out back and a more aggressive spaced tire up front. Can you talk about pros and cons or why people do that?
For sure. In the rear, typically the tighter spacing is just for rolling properties. And so you want a better rolling tire in the rear where you're putting power to the ground. Plus you have your body weight primarily over the back tire, and so you can get away with having a more evenly spaced even in deeper conditions just because you have more weight and helping it penetrate the ground. Okay. On the front, most people have a little bit more open, more aggressive tread pattern. One, because when you start cornering, that's where you really start to put pressure and initiate on your front. But just when rolling in a straight line or seated, you have 30% of your weight up there on average. And so the rolling properties aren't necessarily quite the same as out back. Okay.
And I would imagine, you know, I know tire companies do lots of testing from efficiency and all that sort of stuff. So have you found that you've done tests where you'll have, like, let's just say a knobby nick Magic Mary combo versus a double Magic Mary or a double knobby nick? And like, how big of a difference is there, watts or speed, rolling efficiency?
I mean, we can just talk about tire to tire differences, not necessarily exact combos, but the difference from, say, a Magic Mary, if you use same casing, same compound, keep all other aspects the same, rolling resistance can be up to 20 to 30% difference between tread patterns.
And what would that equate to in a timed run?
In timed run?
Or a ride overall?
It's hard to say timed run because if, say, you're with a timed run, one might give you better braking properties, cornering, etc.
True.
But from a pure wattage standpoint, you can talk about anywhere from 5 to 10 watts in rolling resistance. Okay.
Someone comes in, they don't know what tire they want to get, they don't know how aggressive they want to go, they want to feel safe, but they don't want to be bogged out. Like, how do you kind of help isolate or focus people on what's best for their terrain?
For sure. So, as we talked about in the last video, you just have to start by asking qualifying questions. You know, what kind of rider are you? You know, what kind of bike do you have? How long travel? What terrain are you riding? And then from there, you can start to say, okay, you ride loose, loamy terrain with a bunch of roots and rocks in it. Let's get you something that has a little bit more open tread pattern. Or I ride loose over hard. Let's look at this tread pattern, and then from there you can also say you ride a 140 mil travel bike. We'll put you in this category, and here's the best tire for it. Okay. So
as a rider, you know, on the DH side of the spectrum, I could make one selection, whereas like a Lycra rider could make another selection. Where do you kind of balance like a happy middle ground for both riders to achieve maximum performance?
Exactly, and I think trying to find a happy middle ground is the difficulty in any design of any product. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to be riding the exact same bike as the XC, like spandex clad racer. So we have to tailor our, that's why we have such a broad lineup. And so we can tailor the tire specific to the type of rider people are. There will never be the perfect product for every person out there, regardless of what product it is in the bike industry.
Right. Yeah. Or automotive. I mean,
automotive, any industry. Everyone's going to have their own specific niche that they want fulfilled.
Okay. And obviously, I know brands are constantly evolving and developing new tires. The Magic Mary for many riders, many podiums, has been kind of the go-to. And the Tacky Chan is now kind of like the hot new tire, right? And I know we've heard other brands are working on new tires that'll be coming out soon. I think that are going to probably be in a similar realm. So let's talk about that tire compared to the Magic Mary and sort of differences in two open, downhill, aggressive tread patterns.
As Drew mentioned, the Tacky Chan is our newest tire that came out this summer. It's been very popular. You've just spent some time on it too and been quite happy with it. The Magic Mary's been around for, I think, 10 years now, and one of our most popular mountain bike tread patterns. It's been the go-to. It's won multiple World Cups. The Tacky Chan's won World Cups and overalls at this point as well. So most of our riders are actually choosing between these two based on track conditions. So when we look at the Magic Mary, the tried and true, kind of proven tire, it has a nice evenly spread lug pattern. It doesn't have a massive channel between the center lug and the shoulder, whereas the Tacky Chan does have this larger channel all the way around. So riders, say for a course like Fort William, are still utilizing Magic Marys out front because you have that kind of chunky rocks, and then you get into the forest and there's roots and wet roots, so you want a more evenly spread tread pattern for that, so the lugs always stay in contact. Whereas the Tacky Chan, having this wide open space here, if you get a root right here, it'll slide out. And so this is going to be more of your loose over hard type tire, and more hard pack type tire. You also need to be a lot more aggressive on the Tacky Chan because there is that vague spot between the center and the shoulder, whereas you can kind of slowly lean the bike over on the Magic Mary. Okay.
And what about like softer soil conditions still, like, you know, maybe thinking about like some of the newer tracks in Whistler, right? Where it's like, hasn't been ridden in a whole bunch. Are they going with a Tacky?
So again, it's rider preference. A lot of people are going with a Tacky. Those conditions, you do end up having roots come out and rocks show up unexpectedly. And so sometimes that riders are choosing the Magic Mary just because they want that a little bit more contact patch, so that way you don't have the slipping. But with the more open tread that's on the Tacky Chan, it does get additional ground penetration in those softer conditions.
Okay. So you'd say, I guess, soft conditions barring wet roots or wet slabs of rock, and then loose over hard, the Tacky is going to be a solid way to go.
Exactly.
But you just got to be a little more aggressive because of that float zone.
Exactly. And a lot of people are choosing to make this their front rear combo. So Magic Mary in front, so you get a little bit more consistent feel in the roots and rocks and stuff, and you can allow the rear end to slide around a little bit more, but then still get that grip when you're slashing into corners.
Okay. All right. All right. So that kind of leads me to another question. When you talk about needing to be more aggressive, you know, on the Tacky Chan versus a little bit more of a rounded contact patch on the Mary, is there, I guess, a certain way you would steer riders based on skill level and comfort on the trail as to what would be an ideal tire or tread type pattern for them?
For sure. I mean, as we talked about with the Tacky Chan, having that open channel between the center lug and the shoulder, that would tend to be a more aggressive rider that wants to choose that style of tread pattern. For someone on the beginning end that's just getting into riding, having lugs very closely spaced and evenly spaced across the tread pattern, that's kind of key for them. That way it doesn't have that odd drift point, so they can just slowly lean the bike in and it will feel extremely consistent all the way through the corner. Whereas a tire with a more open area between the center and shoulder, you really have to throw your bike to the side to engage from center lug to the shoulder.
Right. Yeah, which can kind of give a little bit of an unnerving, I don't have any real control feeling until you push farther, but some people will get nervous and stand it up.
Exactly. So newer riders, they feel like it might be drifting or starting to lose traction, so they're not willing to then push it further to engage those shoulders. They just, you know, stand it back up and like just slowly creep around a corner. So
Sure.
if you have that evenly spread tread pattern, you don't have that weird vague spot that that you can experience with some of the tires with wider.
Yeah, and it was interesting, I think, gosh, maybe 2 years ago, we made a video reviewing the Maxxis DHF and the DHR, which I think would be a very similar comparison because the DHF has got, I would even say, maybe a more aggressive float zone than the Taki Chan. And the DHR, you know, would probably be similar to that Magic Mary in that you've got a little more rounded, consistent patch. And you know, we saw a lot of comments of people saying like, I never knew why I felt a little unnervous and so many people loved the Minion DHF, but I felt scared on it.
Yep.
And that would, I guess, be exactly why, right?
Exactly. I think that's just one of those key things to look for in tread patterns across every brand.
Okay.
You know, how far the lugs spread, what's the gap between the shoulder and the center is a very key aspect to how that tire will perform out on the trail.
Okay. Now the Magic Mary is a very aggressive tire, right? Taking it back to someone who maybe isn't like a downhill 160 gnarly type of rider, but wants a consistent feel, the Hans Dampf, which is not a tire we have here. I think it's been in your line for quite a long time, but you guys are still making it, still selling them.
For sure. We're still making the Hans Dampf. It's designed to be that tire that works well in all conditions.
Okay.
Hans Dampf is the German meaning for jack of all trades, and that's truly what that tire is. It's just meant to be the jack of all trades that you can ride in any terrain and feel confident with it.
Okay, so that could be something for maybe riders who don't want to go to a gnarly Magic Mary and kind of get some of the penalties of rolling resistance, weight, height of the knobs, but still get a pretty consistent feel all around if something like a Wicked Will or Knobby Nick isn't quite aggressive enough.
Correct. And the Hans Dampf is also a very popular rear tire choice as well, with the evenly spread knobs. So if you're riding up technical sections and stuff, it'll grip well no matter what. Okay.
All right. So then, yeah, basically it sounds like if you guys are, you know, riders and deciding on which way to go for tread patterns, evaluating what's important to you, safety, you know, cornering, braking, penetration, if you want rolling resistance and speed, of course, you know, your terrain and your desires, right? And the category or travel of bike that you're riding are all gonna be things to consider. So, you know, again, we kind of walked through the Schwalbe lineup today, but you could apply these tire designs, right? And that mission across any number of tire brands that have every offering under the sun. So please reach out with any questions if you have some below. We'd love to get back to you guys and let you know, maybe help steer you. If you're torn between two tires, if we know what kind of terrain you're riding and the conditions, we could help guide you in the right direction. So thank you guys very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and we'll see you in the next video.